My grandchildren forgot I was listening. I heard everything through the baby monitor they didn't know was still on. Broke grandpa can't even afford decent Christmas gifts. Look at this cheap wallet he got me. I'm embarrassed to show my friends. I didn't say anything, but at that moment something inside me broke. I walked to my study and rewrote my will. 8 months later at the reading, they sat there expecting millions. The lawyer opened the envelope, read one sentence, and I watched their faces crumble. They each got exactly $50 while $14 million went to charity. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The baby monitor crackled to life just as I was settling into my reading chair with my evening cup of tea. Emma's voice, my 8-year-old granddaughter, came through clear as day from upstairs where all 4 grandchildren were supposed to be playing quietly. "Did you see what broke Grandpa got me for Christmas?" Emma's voice carried that cruel edge children learn too early. A stupid coloring book from the dollar store. I set down my teacup, my hand trembling slightly. The baby monitor had been forgotten in Emma's room after her little cousin's sleepover last month. They had no idea I could hear every word. "At least you got something useful," came 12-year-old Marcus's voice, my son David's boy. "He gave me this cheap wallet that's already falling apart. The leather's fake." I showed it to Tyler at school and he laughed. My chest tightened. I'd spent 2 hours picking out that wallet at 3 different stores, choosing brown leather because Marcus had mentioned liking the color during our last fishing trip. "Mom says we have to pretend to be grateful," added 10-year-old Sophie, my daughter Lisa's girl. "But it's so embarrassing when friends ask what our rich grandfather got us and we have to lie." Rich grandfather, if they only knew. "My dad says Grandpa Harold is just cheap," came the voice of 6-year-old Jamie, David's younger son. "He's got that big house but won't spend money on us. Dad says when Grandpa dies, we'll finally get the good stuff." "Yeah, Dad showed me pictures of houses we could buy with inheritance money," Marcus continued. "He said Grandpa's probably sitting on millions, but acts poor because he's from that old generation that hoards money." "My mom Googled his construction company," Sophie added with the cruelty that only children possess. "Hammond Construction made tons of money, but Grandpa lives like he's broke. Mom says he's probably afraid to spend anything." Emma giggled, a sound that used to bring me joy but now felt like glass in my chest. "Maybe he forgot he has money because he's so old, like when he forgets where he put his reading glasses." "Or maybe he's waiting for us to ask nicely," Jamie suggested with innocent malice. "Like when I want candy from Mom, I have to say please and hug her." "I'm not hugging him for money," Marcus declared. "He smells like sawdust and old man cologne. Plus his hugs are all scratchy because of his beard." The baby monitor went quiet as they moved to another room, their voices fading into cruel whispers about their embarrassing, cheap grandfather who didn't understand what real presents looked like. I sat in the sudden silence of my study, surrounded by the modest furnishings I'd chosen deliberately, staring at the family photos that lined my bookshelf. 4 grandchildren. 4 ungrateful children who saw their grandfather as nothing more than a miserly old man hoarding wealth while giving them dollar store disappointments. But the worst part wasn't their ingratitude. It was the casual cruelty, the way they discussed my death as a financial opportunity, the complete absence of love or respect in their voices when they talked about me. I walked to my desk and pulled out the leather folder containing my will. The document I'd updated just 6 months ago, leaving everything divided equally among David, Lisa, and their children. $14 million earned over 40 years of building Hammond Construction from nothing but determination and calloused hands. They thought I was cheap, broke, embarrassing, waiting to die so they could finally get the good stuff. Maybe it was time to show them what broke really looked like. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. David knocked on my door at 8 a.m., dressed in his expensive suit and carrying coffee from that overpriced shop downtown. "Morning, Dad. Thought you might like some company with breakfast." I let him in, noting how his eyes immediately went to the modest furniture, the simple decorations, the complete absence of luxury that someone worth $14 million could easily afford. "Lisa's coming by later with the kids," David continued, settling into my second-hand kitchen chair. "They wanted to thank you properly for Christmas presents." Thank me properly. After what I'd heard last night, those words felt like salt in an open wound. "That's thoughtful," I managed, pouring coffee from my basic Mr. Coffee machine into plain white mugs. "Dad, can I ask you something?" David leaned forward with the expression he'd worn since childhood when he wanted something. "Are you having financial problems? I mean, with the medical bills from your heart surgery, the economy, inflation. If you need help." I studied my son's face, looking for genuine concern rather than calculated interest. "Why would you think I'm having problems?" "Well, Christmas presents were different this year, more practical, and you've mentioned cutting back on expenses, driving the old truck longer, not updating the house." He gestured around my kitchen. "This place hasn't been renovated since Mom died 10 years ago." "So you think I'm poor?" David's face flushed slightly. "Not poor exactly, but maybe cash flow challenged. Dad, if the business is struggling, we could help figure something out. Maybe I could look at your books, help with modernizing operations." The irony was suffocating. My son thought I needed his help, managing the company that made more money last year than he'd earned in his entire career. "The business is fine, David. But the lifestyle changes, the modest gifts." He trailed off, clearly fishing for financial information. "Maybe I've realized that expensive gifts don't create grateful children." David's expression shifted, and I caught a glimpse of the calculation behind his concern. "Dad, the kids really appreciate everything you do. They're just young. They don't understand the thought that goes into gift giving." "Don't they?" Before David could answer, Lisa arrived with all 4 grandchildren in tow. The kids shuffled into my kitchen with the reluctant politeness of children forced to perform gratitude. "Grandpa Harold." Emma hugged my waist with theatrical enthusiasm. "Thank you so much for my beautiful coloring book. I love it." The performance was painful to watch. Marcus stepped forward with his fake leather wallet, which I noticed had a small tear along one edge. "Thanks for this awesome wallet, Grandpa. It's exactly what I needed." Sophie and Jamie echoed similar sentiments, their words hollow and rehearsed. I looked at David and Lisa, both beaming with pride at their children's gratitude. "I'm glad you like your presents," I said quietly. "I put a lot of thought into choosing them." "We know you did, Dad," Lisa said, settling into another kitchen chair. "That's what makes them so special. It's not about the money, it's about the love behind the gift." The hypocrisy was stunning. These were the same people who'd raised children to mock my cheap presents and complain about being embarrassed by their grandfather's modest gifts. "Speaking of gifts," David said with studied casualness, "Lisa and I were talking about maybe setting up some kind of educational fund for the kids. You know, something they could use for college or trade school when they're older." "An educational fund." "Nothing fancy," Lisa added quickly. "Just something to help with their futures. We know how much you value education, and we thought maybe it would be a way to really make a difference in their lives." I looked at my 4 grandchildren, remembering their cruel words from the night before. Emma checking her fingernails with boredom. Marcus texting on his phone despite family rules about devices at the table. Sophie whispering something to Jamie that made him giggle. "That's an interesting idea," I said. "Tell me, kids, what would you do with educational money?" Emma brightened, sensing an opportunity. "I'd go to art school and buy really good art supplies, not the cheap ones from Walmart." Marcus looked up from his phone. "I'd probably get a car first, for getting to college, maybe something nice like Tyler's BMW." Sophie bounced in her chair. "I want to study fashion design in Paris, like the movie I saw about the girl who becomes a famous designer." Jamie, only 6, announced solemnly, "I'd buy a PlayStation and games for learning." David and Lisa exchanged pleased glances, clearly thinking their children's answers showed maturity and planning. I saw something different, the same entitlement that had led them to mock my gifts while simultaneously expecting my money. "Those are big dreams," I said. "What would you be willing to sacrifice to achieve them?" Confused silence around the table. "Sacrifice?" Marcus asked. "Yes. What would you give up, work for, or change about yourselves to deserve that kind of investment?" "Well, I'd study hard," Emma said uncertainly. "I'd get good grades," Sophie added. "Would you be grateful for smaller gifts along the way? Would you appreciate help even if it didn't come in the form you expected?" More confused silence. I could see David and Lisa growing uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Dad, they're just kids," Lisa said. "They don't need to understand adult concepts like sacrifice and investment." "Don't they? At what age should children learn that gifts require gratitude, that money requires respect, that family members deserve better than mockery?" David's face darkened. "What's this about, Dad? Are you upset about something?" I looked around the table at my family, 2 adult children who taught their kids to see me as a cheap disappointment, and 4 grandchildren who'd learned those lessons perfectly. "I'm not upset," I said quietly. "I'm just reevaluating priorities." After they left, promising to visit again soon, probably hoping to extract more information about my finances, I sat alone in my kitchen and made a decision that would change everything. I called Thomas Peterson, my attorney for 30 years. "Harold, good to hear from you. How are you feeling since the surgery?" "Better than ever, Tom. I need to make some changes to my will, significant changes." "What kind of changes?" "The kind that will teach my family the difference between gratitude and greed." The law offices of Peterson and Associates occupied the top floor of downtown Portland's financial district. I'd used their services for 3 decades, watching young attorneys become partners while I built my construction empire from a single truck and a toolbox. "Harold, this is quite a departure from your previous estate planning," Tom said, reviewing my instructions. "Are you certain about these changes?" "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." "Leaving each grandchild only $50 while donating $14 million to charity." "Harold, they're going to contest this. David and Lisa will claim undue influence, diminished capacity, something." "Let them try. I'm 78 years old, Tom, but my mind is sharp as ever. I want this will to be bulletproof." "Then we need to document everything. Medical evaluations, psychological assessments, detailed reasoning for your decisions. And I'd recommend we record the will reading." "Record it. Video and audio. If they claim you weren't of sound mind, we'll have their reactions as evidence of your mental clarity and their motivations." We spent the next 3 months building an uncontestable case. Medical evaluations confirmed my excellent mental health. Psychological assessments showed clear thinking and rational decision-making. Financial records proved my wealth far exceeded what my family imagined. Most importantly, I kept detailed journals documenting every interaction with my children and grandchildren, every casual comment about my supposed poverty, every moment of ingratitude disguised as concern. The evidence painted a clear picture. A wealthy man whose family saw him as embarrassingly cheap, while secretly hoping for his death to release their inheritance. During this time, my family's behavior became even more transparent. David started visiting twice a week, always with suggestions about modernizing my lifestyle or taking advantage of my hard-earned success. "Dad, you've worked your entire life building that company. Don't you think it's time to enjoy some of the rewards?" "What kind of rewards?" "A nicer house, a new car, maybe some travel. You and Mom always talked about seeing Europe. Your mother and I were happy with what we had. But you could have so much more. You could live like the successful businessman you are instead of." He gestured around my modest living room. "Instead of what, David?" "Instead of someone who's afraid to spend money." The conversations always circled back to money. How much I had, how little I spent, how my modest lifestyle didn't reflect my true wealth. Never once did David ask about my happiness, my health, or my feelings about anything that didn't relate to finances. Lisa's approach was different but equally transparent. She brought the grandchildren more frequently, orchestrating elaborate displays of affection that felt more like auditions than genuine visits. "Emma made you a card, Dad." "Show him, honey." Emma would present a craft store card with "World's Best Grandpa" printed in glittery letters, her own writing adding messages like "Thank you for loving me" and "You're the nicest grandpa ever." The performances were heartbreaking because they highlighted how calculating the adults had become, while the children remained oblivious to the deeper currents of greed and manipulation flowing around them. The breaking point came 6 months after I'd rewritten my will. I was recovering from a minor procedure, nothing serious, just outpatient surgery to remove a small growth, when I overheard David and Lisa talking in my hospital room. They thought I was asleep. "The doctor said it was benign, thank God," Lisa whispered. "Yeah, but he's 78. How much longer can he really have?" David's voice carried cold calculation rather than concern. "David." "What? I'm being practical. We need to start planning for when he's gone. Have you seen what houses cost now? Marcus will need college money in 6 years." "I know, but talking about Dad dying while he's right there." "He's sedated. And Lisa, we need to face reality. He's not going to live forever, and when he goes, we need to be ready." "Ready for what?" "Ready to handle his affairs properly. Did you know he still doesn't have a financial advisor? Everything's just sitting in basic savings accounts and CDs. We could probably double his money with proper investment management." "His money, David, not ours." "It's going to be ours eventually. The will leaves everything to us and the kids. We might as well start optimizing the portfolio now." I lay perfectly still, listening to my children discuss managing my wealth as if I were already dead. The casual way they planned my funeral while planning to spend my money was chilling. "Have you talked to him about updating the will recently?" Lisa asked. "I tried, but he gets defensive, says everything is handled properly and won't give details." "Maybe we should suggest he meet with an estate planning attorney, for his own peace of mind." "Good idea. We could frame it as protecting his legacy, making sure his wishes are carried out properly." Their voices faded as they moved toward the door, but I'd heard enough. My children weren't just counting on my death. They were actively planning for it, discussing my money like it already belonged to them. That afternoon, I called Tom Peterson from my hospital bed. "Tom, I want to add something to the will." A detailed explanation of my decisions. something that will be read aloud after the monetary bequests. What kind of explanation? The truth about what I've heard, what I've seen, how my family really feels about their cheap, broke grandfather. The letter took weeks to craft, with Tom's help ensuring every word was legally sound and emotionally devastating. We documented specific conversations, recorded dates and witnesses, created an unassailable record of ingratitude and greed that would explain my decisions to anyone who questioned them. Harold, this letter is going to destroy them. Good, maybe destruction will teach them what construction never could. The final version was 8 pages of careful documentation, explaining not just what I'd decided but why. Every cruel comment, every calculated visit, every moment when money mattered more than the man who'd earned it. 2 months later, I suffered what would be my final heart attack, massive and sudden, while reading in my study. I managed to call 911, but we all knew this was the end. David and Lisa rushed to the hospital, their children in tow. For the first time in years, all 4 grandchildren seemed genuinely concerned about losing their grandfather. "Grandpa Harold, are you going to be okay?" Emma asked, her 8-year-old eyes wide with real fear. "I'm going to be fine, sweetheart, but I need you to remember something for me." "What, Grandpa?" "The best gifts aren't always the most expensive ones. Sometimes the most valuable things in life cost nothing at all." Emma nodded solemnly, though I could see she didn't understand. Marcus stepped closer to my hospital bed, his usual teenage attitude replaced with genuine worry. "Grandpa, I'm sorry if I ever seemed ungrateful. I really did like the wallet you got me." The irony was heartbreaking. Now, when it was too late, they were showing the gratitude and affection I'd longed for during the months of eavesdropping on their cruel comments. Sophie held my hand with trembling fingers. "Will you get better? I don't want you to go to heaven yet." "Heaven's not so bad, sweetheart. Your grandmother's waiting for me there." Jamie, only 6, climbed onto David's lap to get closer to my bed. "Grandpa, when you're better, will you teach me to build things like you do?" "I'll teach you something even more important, buddy. I'll teach you that it's better to be grateful for small gifts than ungrateful for big ones." David leaned over my bed, his face drawn with genuine emotion for the first time in months. "Dad, I love you. I know I haven't said it enough lately, but I want you to know how much you mean to all of us." "I love you too, son. I love all of you. That's why I've made sure you'll learn the lessons you need to learn." "What lessons?" "You'll understand soon enough." Lisa squeezed my other hand. "Dad, is there anything you want to tell us? Anything important we should know?" I looked around at my family, 2 adult children who'd spent months calculating my worth, 4 grandchildren who'd mocked my gifts while expecting my wealth, and felt a strange peace. "Yes, I want you to know that every decision I've made was out of love, even the ones that will seem cruel." 3 days later, I died surrounded by family members holding my hands and whispering words of love that would have meant more if they'd said them when I was healthy enough to build new memories together. The will reading was scheduled for the following Friday at Peterson and Associates. David and Lisa arrived in their best clothes, David in the expensive suit he wore for important business meetings, Lisa in the designer dress she'd bought for special occasions. The grandchildren were dressed up and unusually well-behaved, clearly coached about appropriate behavior for such an important day. Tom Peterson had arranged for video recording as requested, positioning cameras to capture everyone's faces when the will was read. The family gathered around his conference table, expectant and excited about finally learning the extent of Harold Hammond's wealth. "Before we begin," Tom announced, "I want everyone to understand that this will was written and signed by Harold Hammond while he was of sound mind and body, witnessed by 3 independent parties, psychologically evaluated, and is legally binding in every respect. Nods around the table. David straightened his expensive tie. Lisa smoothed her designer skirt. The children sat quietly, probably promised treats afterward for good behavior. The will is quite specific about individual bequests before addressing the residual estate. Tom opened the official document and began reading in his professional attorney voice. To my granddaughter Emma Hammond, age 8, I leave the sum of $50 to be paid in cash from my checking account. Confused silence. Emma looked at her parents with questioning eyes. $50 was more money than she usually saw at once, but something about the adults' expressions suggested this wasn't the celebration they'd expected. To my grandson Marcus Hammond, age 12, I leave the sum of $50 to be paid in cash from my checking account. David's face was beginning to change color. Lisa gripped her designer purse handle tighter. To my granddaughter Sophie Hammond, age 10, I leave the sum of $50 to be paid in cash from my checking account. What the hell is this? David interrupted, his voice rising with the first hint of panic. Please let me finish reading, Tom said calmly. To my grandson Jamie Hammond, age 6, I leave the sum of $50 to be paid in cash from my checking account. $50 each. Lisa's voice cracked with disbelief. That's it. What about college funds? What about their futures? The children were beginning to understand that something was wrong. Emma started crying softly. Marcus stared at Tom with growing horror. Sophie looked back and forth between her parents and the attorney with confusion. Tom continued reading. To my son David Hammond, I leave my personal tools and workshop equipment, with the hope that he might finally learn to build something with his own hands rather than simply inheriting the fruits of others' labor. David's face was now completely white. This can't be right. There has to be more. To my daughter Lisa Hammond, I leave my late wife's jewelry and personal effects, with the hope that she might remember the woman who taught her that love cannot be bought or sold. Lisa was hyperventilating. Dad's company, the house, the investments, what about everything else? Tom turned to the next page of the will. The remainder of my estate, including Hammond Construction Company, all real property, investment accounts, savings, and personal effects not specifically mentioned above, totaling approximately $14 million, shall be used to establish the Rebecca Hammond Foundation for Underprivileged Children. The conference room erupted in chaos. $14 million. David shot to his feet, knocking over his chair. He was worth $14 million and left us nothing. This is impossible. Lisa was sobbing now, her careful makeup streaming down her cheeks. He can't leave everything to charity. We're his family, his own blood. Marcus, now understanding the magnitude of what they'd lost, burst into tears. $14 million. Grandpa had $14 million. But I need college money. All my friends' grandparents leave them college funds. Sophie stared at Tom with wide, horrified eyes. $14 million would buy a lot of art supplies. Why would Grandpa Harold give it to strangers instead of us? Emma, the youngest, asked the question that cut deepest. Didn't Grandpa love us anymore? Tom held up his hand for silence. There's more. Harold requested that I read a letter explaining his decisions. This letter was written in his own handwriting and witnessed by medical professionals who can attest to his mental clarity. He pulled out a thick document, 8 pages of my careful script. Tom's voice carried my words to the family who thought they'd known me. To my children and grandchildren, if you're hearing this letter, it means you've just learned that your broke grandpa was worth $14 million that you'll never see. This decision wasn't made in anger, though anger played a part. It wasn't made in spite, though your attitudes caused me deep pain. It was made in love, the kind of tough love that teaches lessons comfort never could. David and Lisa, for the past year, you've visited me with increasing frequency, but your conversations always centered on money. David, you suggested I modernize my lifestyle and enjoy the rewards of success. Lisa, you brought the children for orchestrated displays of affection that felt more like auditions than genuine visits. Neither of you ever asked about my happiness, my health, or my feelings about anything that didn't relate to your eventual inheritance. I heard you in my hospital room, David, calculating how much longer I had to live and discussing investment strategies for my money while you thought I was sedated. I heard you, Lisa, planning to optimize my portfolio as if I were already dead. But the final blow came 8 months ago when I accidentally overheard my grandchildren through a forgotten baby monitor. Emma, you called me broke grandpa and said you were embarrassed by the coloring book I'd chosen carefully for you at 3 different stores. You said it was from the dollar store, though it cost me $12 at Barnes & Noble because it featured your favorite cartoon character. Marcus, you complained that the wallet I gave you was fake leather and already falling apart. You told your friend Tyler it was embarrassing. That wallet was genuine leather, cost me $45, and I spent 2 hours at the mall comparing options because you'd mentioned liking brown leather during our fishing trip. Sophie, you talked about lying to friends about what your rich grandfather had given you. You said you were embarrassed when friends asked about your gifts. The art set I gave you cost $60 and was recommended by your art teacher, but apparently it wasn't impressive enough for your social circle. Jamie, you repeated your father's words that I was just cheap and waiting to die so you could get the good stuff. At 6 years old, you'd already learned to see your grandfather as a financial opportunity rather than a person. But the conversation that broke my heart was when you discussed my death as if it were a business transaction. Marcus, you said your father had shown you pictures of houses you could buy with inheritance money. Sophie, you said your mother had Googled my company to calculate my worth. Emma, you joked that I'd forgotten I had money because I was so old, comparing me to misplacing reading glasses. You laughed about my age, my appearance, my modest lifestyle, and my approaching death, all while planning to spend money you thought I was too stupid or senile to enjoy myself. None of you understood that I lived modestly by choice, not necessity. I wanted to raise children and grandchildren who valued character over cash, who appreciated thoughtfulness over expense, who understood that real wealth comes from gratitude and compassion. Instead, I raised a family who saw me as an embarrassment, a rich man too cheap to act rich, too stupid to enjoy his money, too old to matter except as an inheritance opportunity. The $50 each grandchild receives represents exactly what they thought I could afford. You called me broke, so now you'll experience what broke actually means. The $14 million you didn't know existed will go to children who will treasure dollar store coloring books because they understand that gifts come from love, not obligation. David, I'm leaving you my tools because you've spent your entire adult life inheriting rather than building. Maybe working with your hands will teach you the value of creating something instead of just waiting to receive it. Lisa, I'm leaving you your mother's jewelry because she understood that love cannot be bought or sold. Maybe wearing her rings will remind you of the woman who valued people over possessions. The Rebecca Hammond Foundation will serve children who write thank you notes for coloring books, who treasure wallets regardless of the leather quality, who appreciate thoughtfulness because they understand what it means to go without. These children will receive the millions you'll never see because they possess the gratitude you never developed. I want you to understand what your attitudes cost you. Every cruel comment, every casual dismissal, every moment when you saw me as cheap rather than generous, greedy rather than careful, embarrassing rather than dignified. You expected millions but valued nothing. These children will receive thousands and treasure everything. I hope someday you'll teach your own children different lessons. That gratitude is more valuable than gold. That love is measured in thoughtfulness rather than dollars. That family members deserve respect regardless of their bank accounts. The video recording of this reading will be kept as part of my estate records. Your reactions to learning about wealth you never knew existed, an inheritance you'll never receive, are now documented forever. Future generations of your family will be able to see exactly what greed looks like when it discovers its own cost. To the children who will benefit from the Rebecca Hammond Foundation, use this money wisely. Remember that it comes from a grandfather whose own family forgot to be grateful, and let that be a lesson about what really matters in life. To Emma, Marcus, Sophie, and Jamie, your $50 can buy almost nothing in your world of expensive expectations, but I hope it will buy you something more valuable, the understanding that love cannot be inherited, only earned through kindness, appreciation, and respect. I loved you all, but I couldn't reward the values you'd embraced. Maybe loss will teach you what abundance never could. Harold Hammond, grandfather, written with a broken heart but clear conscience. The silence that followed was deafening. David stared at the table, his expensive suit suddenly feeling like a costume worn by an actor who'd forgotten his lines. Lisa sobbed quietly into her designer handbag, realizing that all her material possessions were now meaningless without the inheritance she'd counted on. Marcus was the first to find his voice, his 12-year-old words carrying the weight of devastating realization. He heard everything when we called him broke grandpa. The baby monitor, Emma whispered through her tears. We forgot about the baby monitor in my room. Sophie looked at her mother with dawning horror. Mom, did we make Grandpa sad? Is that why he gave our money away? Lisa couldn't answer through her crying. Jamie, only 6 but old enough to understand catastrophe, asked the question that destroyed everyone. Can we say sorry to Grandpa and get the money back? No, sweetheart, Tom said gently. Your grandfather is gone and this decision is final. David finally found his voice, though it came out strangled. 14 million. He was sitting on $14 million, and we never knew. He tried to teach you about gratitude and appreciation, Tom said quietly. Harold spent his final months hoping your family would show some sign of valuing him for who he was rather than what he could provide. But we did love him, Lisa protested. We visited all the time, the children made him cards. Did you? Tom consulted his notes. According to Harold's journals, David, your last 5 visits all included suggestions about Harold spending more money or questions about his financial situation. Lisa, you orchestrated affection displays that Harold described as auditions for inheritance. David buried his face in his hands. Oh God, we were so obvious. Harold was an intelligent man who built a $14 million company from nothing. Did you really think he wouldn't notice when every conversation centered on money? The video cameras captured every moment of their devastation, every tear, every expression of horror, every realization of what their attitudes had cost them. The recordings would become part of the permanent estate record, documenting the exact moment when greed discovered its price. There has to be something we can do, David said desperately. Contest the will, claim diminished capacity, something. You're welcome to try, Tom said, but Harold prepared for that possibility. We have medical evaluations confirming his excellent mental health, psychological assessments showing clear thinking, and months of documented evidence supporting his decisions. Plus, this video recording shows your reactions to learning about wealth you never knew existed. Hardly the response of people who genuinely cared about Harold rather than his money. Lisa looked up from her tears, mascara creating dark trails down her cheeks. What about the children's futures? College, their dreams? Harold addressed that in his planning. The foundation will provide educational opportunities for children who demonstrate gratitude and financial need. Your children are welcome to apply for assistance, but they'll compete with thousands of other applicants who might value the opportunity more. Marcus stared at Tom with 12-year-old devastation. You mean I have to beg for college money from the charity that got my inheritance? You have to earn any assistance you receive, just like every other applicant. Emma, still crying, asked, "Why didn't Grandpa tell us he had so much money?" "Because he wanted to see who you really were when you thought he had nothing to give." The will reading concluded with legal formalities, signatures, documentation, official transfer of the $50, bequests to accounts that would be managed until the children reached majority. David received a set of keys to Harold's workshop. Lisa received a small box of Rebecca Hammond's jewelry. As the family filed out of the conference room, their faces showing the complete destruction of everything they'd expected their future to hold, Tom called out one final message. "Harold asked me to remind you that this foundation will help children who would treasure the gifts you complained about. Every dollar store coloring book, every fake leather wallet, every modest present you found embarrassing will seem like treasure to kids who understand what it means to receive nothing." 6 months later, the Rebecca Hammond Foundation held its first Christmas gift distribution. Hundreds of underprivileged children lined up to receive presents bought with money that would have gone to 4 ungrateful grandchildren. I watch from wherever grandfathers go after they die, seeing children cry with joy over dollar store coloring books and treasure fake leather wallets like precious artifacts. Children who wrote thank you notes in crayon, who hugged volunteers with genuine appreciation, who understood that gifts represent love rather than obligation. Emma, Marcus, Sophie, and Jamie learned what $50 could buy in their expensive world, almost nothing. But they also learned what $14 million had been worth, everything they'd lost forever through ingratitude and cruelty. The foundation grew rapidly, funded by Harold's carefully managed investments and overseen by a board of directors who'd never met the Hammond family, but understood the importance of teaching gratitude alongside generosity. David tried to contest the will, but found himself facing overwhelming evidence of his own greed. Recorded conversations, documented visits focused on money, medical testimony about Harold's mental clarity, and video evidence of his family's reactions to learning about wealth they'd never valued the source of. Lisa attempted to reconnect with the foundation, volunteering her time and suggesting ways the family might contribute to Harold's legacy. But the foundation's board had clear instructions. The Hammond family was welcome to apply for assistance like any other family in need, but they would receive no special consideration and no insider access. The children learned difficult lessons about consequences and gratitude. Marcus took a part-time job at 14 to start saving for college, discovering the satisfaction of earning money through work rather than inheritance. Emma began volunteering at local children's charities, seeing firsthand what real poverty looked like compared to her family's complaints about modest gifts. Sophie started a gratitude journal, writing down 3 things she appreciated each day as penance for the cruel comments she'd made about her grandfather's generosity. Jamie, now understanding what broke grandpa really meant, told other children at school to appreciate their grandparents while they could. Years later, when the children had grown into young adults, They would sometimes visit Harold's grave to apologize for words that could never be taken back and attitudes that had cost them everything. They'd learned that some lessons can only be taught through loss, and some inheritances can only be earned through love. The Rebecca Hammond Foundation continues to serve children who treasure simple gifts because they understand their true value. Every coloring book, every wallet, every modest present represents love rather than disappointment, gratitude rather than greed. And sometimes, late at night in the Foundation's offices, staff members swear they can hear an old man's voice whispering words of encouragement for the children who learned to appreciate what others had taken for granted. Because Harold Hammond's final gift wasn't money. It was the lesson that true wealth comes from gratitude, and the most expensive mistake anyone can make is taking love for granted while counting someone else's money. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To everyone listening, I challenge you to examine how you speak about family members when you think they can't hear you. Children learn values from the adults around them, and sometimes those lessons cost more than anyone can afford. Gratitude isn't just good manners, it's the foundation of meaningful relationships and financial security. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.